Hi everyone, my name is Chris. I'm very lucky to be founder and Chief Enabling Officer of iCan Network, which is an autistic-led organisation. I'd like to give an acknowledgement of country. In the spirit of reconciliation, iCan acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, community and culture. We pay our respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. I'm very lucky to be autistic. I was a student at Fairhills Primary, which is a government primary school out in the outer eastern suburbs of Melbourne. I then went to a government secondary school, Montana College, where I was very, very lucky to have both a principal and a Year 7 transition coordinator who really did save my life. My Year 7 transition coordinator was a government school teacher who loved teaching English. Her name was Christine Horvath. She had a natural interest in her students. She always had a very positive first reaction to your interests. She would leverage your interests and quirks, both in curriculum and in the social foray of school. She also was very non-judgmental. You could share with her any little anxiety you might be experiencing, and she was very intuitive with developing little responsibilities for you to have. And it was when you were experiencing those little responsibilities that she would help you with self-reflection and self-awareness, which were all important things for teenagers to develop. Of course, she had a principal that worked with her, Terry Bennett, who really enabled her. They were a fantastic team. Unfortunately, she died at the end of my Year 12 from cancer. And it was the impact of watching a whole community experience the impact of this amazing teacher and watching, our principal give her eulogy. And that moment in time had a very formative impact on me. And I always thought, why can't every single autistic neurodivergence experience of school be like this? And so you're joining an organization this morning that really does exist in the name of, the relationship between one Year 7 coordinator, a principal and an autistic student and their parent carer. That's why we are so passionate about working with schools. iCan Network works with 75 Victorian government schools. If you include different government school campuses, it's 81 government school campuses. We are very lucky to deliver autistic-led group mentoring programs in both primary schools and secondary schools. Today, you will hear a lot about some language that's relevant to Victorian government schools. However, today's content is also relevant to the Catholic education system and really any school. We're very lucky to have some fantastic panelists join us today. First is Rachael Hamilton, who is Disability Inclusion Student Ambassador. Wherever you might be in Australia or the world, we have a huge reform being rolled out across Victoria called Disability Inclusion, which changes the whole funding system for students who require adjustments in schools. The funding system's now based on their strengths, not their challenges, or as we used to refer to them, deficits. So Rachael is tasked with building momentum as an ambassador behind that. We also have Dr. David Howes, who's Deputy Secretary for Schools and Regional Services in the department. David, some months ago, reached out to me and said, how can I get involved with iCan and promote this? So thank you very much for your interest, David. We're very lucky to have you here today. We have a fantastic principals panel. We have Janet DiPilla from Brunswick East Primary School. Brunswick East Primary School is a beautiful primary school. It's got a big emphasis on, things being student-led and student autonomy. They have a really innovative learning community structure there. That's really impressive. We have Erin Wright, who's principal at Surf Coast Secondary College. Surf Coast Secondary is a fantastic regional government secondary school where there's a huge emphasis on students being individuals. All my 4 visits to that school, I've always walked away with that strong vibe that students could be who they are. We have Steve Crossley, who's principal at Portland Bay School. Portland Bay is a specialist school, and what I love about Portland Bay is it really does. It's a lot more than a school. It's a bit of a pillar of the community in Portland. And Steve, who is an extremely humble person, is a very respected educator in that area and networks so well with neighbouring schools. To give one brief example, our primary school program, he brings along 7 other primary schools to join in the sessions there. So I think that's a testament to who Steve is. We have Rod, who is assistant principal at Hoppers Crossing Secondary College. Hoppers is a fantastic secondary school. It's got a very engaged teaching team, people who've been passionate about their work and working together for many years. They are just so invested in their students. The number of times I've had conversations with teachers there, which has always shown me that they're going the extra mile. It's a great government school. All right, so we will make a start. I will stop share. And we are now going to have Rachael Hamilton as Disability Inclusion Student Ambassador give you a testimony on her experience.
Oh, there we go. Good morning, everyone. I'm Rachael Hamilton. I'm the Disability Inclusion Student Ambassador. I haven't had the most straightforward schooling experience. In year 7, I was an undiagnosed autistic who struggled to make friends and fit in at school. In year 8, this was only exacerbated by a severe anxiety disorder, which drove me to school refusal. And then in year 9, I dropped out of school entirely. As I'm sure you know, 14-year-olds are incredibly wise people, and I knew that too. So I told myself that I was happy, that I didn't need school or friends. I just needed Netflix. I was only lying to myself though. I wasn't happy and I wasn't getting anywhere. So with the support of some incredible teachers and my extraordinary mum, I agreed to give education a second chance. In 2020, I enrolled at a school designed for students at risk of disengaging from education or who had already disengaged, like myself. Being in a school full of students with such a variety of backgrounds, challenges, identities, diagnoses, and experiences was an eye-opener. It was a rainbow of differences. My first day at this new school, I walked through the door and was asked the question, "What do you want to do?" It was purely interest and strength-based learning. The school's sole focus was on getting me through the door so I could do what I was interested in. They knew that education needed to be inclusive. And to be inclusive, it needed to be accessible. Accessibility can look different to everyone, and for me, it meant engagement. Of course, there were still education standards the school had to run by, but by making the smallest adjustments to fit my learning style and make the work engaging to me, I was given access and included in receiving an education. Accessible adjustments were made to all of my subjects. I got to write essays on autism in girls. I learnt to budget a trip, and I even got to perform pieces on my trumpet because they were all things I loved doing and they kept me engaged. And when I was engaged, I was learning. I used to think that the only way to learn was by sitting in a classroom, absorbing information, and for some students it is, but I've since realized that I can learn and educate myself simply by doing things I love, because that is how education is made inclusive of me and my needs. I successfully graduated from high school last year, which is not something I'd ever thought I'd say, but here I am. I continue to play trumpet in several bands around the state. I also plan to study occupational therapy as a part of my passion for helping others like me. And I have recently returned from a 3-week trip to New Zealand, which was planned and budgeted for by myself and 2 friends. So don't tell me you can't learn by not reading a textbook, because I've clearly proved that wrong. You can. I'm not the result of an education system that didn't work for me. I'm the result of an education system that did, all by making it accessible, engaging, and inclusive of me. Today, I'm proud to be a Disability Inclusion Ambassador who has the opportunity to advocate for others and share my experiences with ICANN schools, teachers, parents, carers, and of course, students. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rachael. I'm not the result of an education system that didn't work for me. I'm the result of an education system that did. What a great way to start Wednesday. Wow. You will have opportunity. There's 102 of us here, so please write in the chat or the Q&A if you have a question for Rachel. We will have a time today for people to ask questions and for you to engage with the panel. Next, we have Dr. David Howes, who's Deputy Secretary for Schools and Regional Services. We've given David some prompts, and I will give him the space now. I'm happy to ask you the questions or just let you share as you like, David.
Morning all. Well, why don't you kick it off, Chris? But before you do that, thank you for convening this, Rachel. That was quite a way to start the day. Thank you for sharing so honestly, and I do want to reflect on some of the things that you've said. And I'll also acknowledge Chris here. I'm in the city of Melbourne. That's on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who might be part of our conversation this morning. But why don't you ask me what you'd like, Chris? Get going.
Well, David, it would be great to hear from you what your vision for inclusion is at a Victorian government school.
I think I kind of feel like I should hand over to Rachel for that, because she summed it up exactly right, that it is an education system that works for all. And, at one level, my aim in supporting all the disinclusion reforms, it was that point you made, Rachel, about not having friends. And if every neurodivergent student, every student who had experienced some disability was invited to the parties that everyone gets invited to and had a friend, that's when I'd know we were really making progress, I think, because that's the role of schools as places of social connection, and that being such an important part of all of our mental health and well-being is kind of one of the primary goals of schooling, and kind of learning is critical but secondary to that. And I think one of the ways in which we've been able to be clear about that is to the revisions to the framework for improving student outcomes, which is the kind of structure that we work with our schools, and that's placed learning and well-being as equal priorities. That, Chris, then there are the more kind of technical aspects of making the supports that will enable equal access in the fullest sense of that word for every child and every student, to the full range of the curriculum is provided to the fullest extent possible. So that, again, Rachel, that one of the things I enjoyed so much in what you said was the playing of the trumpet, right? And that we see playing the trumpet just as important as whatever NAPLAN results you might happen to end up with, and that capacity that schools give people, Chris, of the full spectrum of people to find that they can enjoy playing the trumpet or the harmonica or the drums, as well as finding that table tennis or snooker or chess or drafts is what gets them up in the morning, or working on robotics or cooking muffins, that full range of human experience, to make that as accessible to every student in every school is kind of what's driving us at the moment. And acknowledging we're a fair way from that, but the principles of the schools around this virtual table are certainly leading the rest of us.
Thanks, David. So you've got responsibility for 1,554 government schools. I think it's around that number. It might be a few more than that. That's an enormous task. Obviously, you receive lots of reports, and there's the FISO 2.0 and all of these frameworks. But how can you tell whether a government school has prioritised inclusion?
Well, a key one is asking the students and hearing from their feedback, and there are surveys and structures to do that, but often, very, very often, it's the word of mouth, because it's especially your point again, Rachel. There was so much in what you said that struck a chord with me. You acknowledged the role of your mother, and the role that families and carers play can be so critical, but one of the things that I think it's the responsibility of schools to do is also step into that space where we know there are children who aren't in the situation you had, and for whatever reason and don't get the family support that you had, and schools then need to step into that space. But the feedback from students and then through parents, Chris, to us directly and through mechanisms like the surveys that we run are the critical indicators. But word of mouth is the most powerful, and certainly something that, as the power of Rachel's testimony suggested this morning, the thing that makes often the most impact.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Well said. And so obviously, there's many government school leaders listening who have huge dreams for their school. And sometimes those dreams don't neatly fit into a school budget. We all have constraints around our strategic intent. But the disability inclusion reform, this is a huge landmark funding reform here. What do you hope will be different for government schools as a result of the disability inclusion reform?
Well, I think it's your point at the start that it's ensuring that we all start from a different frame of reference, which is from looking at people's strengths and then addressing the areas in which they need support, not regarding the whole purposes to kind of identify the problems and, as you said, the deficits. And the language isn't everything, but it is a lot. And the way in which we talk about things, the words we use, reflects the mental images that we have in our minds about what we're talking about. And I mean, you're going to get sick of me saying this, but again, Rachel, one of the other points you made, right, was starting when you walked in the school door, what do you want to do, right? It's first of all validating that you've got agency and that you actually are very aware of what you'd like to do and what you're able to do. And I'm sure that, well, I can test this, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure a kind of subsequent question down the track was talking about what are the things that you'd like to develop, what are the things that you want to work on, because they're not at the place where you want them to be. So Chris, that's the kind of, that's the fundamental starting point, right, is seeing that the way in which language has shaped the way we think about disability is about kind of addressing the problems, addressing the deficits. You started off this seminar, I think, by saying words to the effect that you were proud to lead ICANN and that your own autism you see as something that's central to who you are and what you're able to contribute. And that is the way in which we want that's the kind of fundamental shift that we hope that the changes to the funding system will help accelerate, develop, take further. And then there is overall more, as a result of this, there will be more resources that go into schools, especially to provide those supports across the board, in addition to the targeted supports for students who have the highest levels of need. And one of the challenges for the department, and this is not putting this onto schools, is how do we provide the kind of access to the evidence, the resources that have been shown to work best, so that the principals in this room who are working at their absolute capacity don't have another thing put onto them saying, can you do the research that says what works best in these different things? We want to be much better placed to say, here are the kind of things that work. And again, the role that I can play in this is critical, of being able for us to use a kind of sounding board of saying, well, here's what it looks like we think is proving to be most successful, but we need to road test that with you. What's your view? So ICANN's role in this is going to be critical. So I think it's the two things, Chris, are changing the language we use, because that'll change our conceptualization, and then the differential funding that will be going in, but making sure that that schools are equipped to be able to use it on the things that'll make a difference.
Thank you, David. We have 1 minute left. My understanding of obviously your huge team and mandate, David, is that you're really concerned with the development, talent management, and support of principals and their teams. How, like in the spirit of wanting to help, how can a small NGO like ICANN really help you to imprint inclusion on the development of tomorrow's principals?
Yeah, no, it's a very useful prompt, and it's I mean, one of the things I do want to follow up with you after this is the We've got established since last year the Victorian Academy of Teaching and Leadership, which is a new body, and there isn't anything quite like it in the rest of Australia. And one of the things that they do is run the VAPA course. And of course, everybody loves acronyms, but that's the Victorian Aspiring Principals accreditation program. I do want to have a discussion with you, Chris, about the input that ICANN could have into that program of ensuring that one of the critical things that we're doing in preparing principals is saying the role, the way in which every school works with the full range of students is as critical as the way that you develop the capacity to manage your staffing and run the budget and ensure the maintenance is done. That the work with both neurodivergent students and students with disability is now a front and center role for every principal. And so for your support in working out your input into looking at what we're doing in that space, and I'm sure that there are things that we could do a lot better, would be really welcome. And that does give an organisation like ICANN the chance to influence the people who are coming in as leaders to our system right across the board, rural, regional, small, large, all of our schools.
Thanks so much, David. We are very, very keen to help. We'll very grateful for your time. We will release you. You're welcome to stay, but we understand if you have other commitments. Now we will begin our principals panel. So there's some questions we've put to this great group of principals. Some of them are taking particular ones. So we're going to ask the principals to reflect on, what impact they've seen from their ICANN programs, if they have the ICANN program, what steps teaching staff outside of their disability inclusion teams could take to, champion inclusion, and how can we support them? One thing we're aware of is that people in a school structure will have the portfolio of disability inclusion or program for students with disability, but how can a principal take active steps to empower other teaching staff to really champion this important area? And for those school principals who've got the disability inclusion reform in their area, how did they prepare their staff to succeed with the reform? So next we'll go to Janet, principal at Brunswick East Primary School, who has a time constraint this morning. I'll throw over to you, Janet.
Thanks very much, Chris. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay. And I'm sorry if there's noise in the background, but I'm at Moonee Valley this morning. So not betting, but just waiting for a network meeting. So if I can start with Brunswick East Primary School, commonly known as BEPS, would see itself very much as an inclusive school. It's got plenty of diversity. In fact, I tell anybody that will listen to me that Brunswick East has every type of family and academic qualification, and a few that you haven't heard of or seen or even thought of. But we don't have much cultural diversity. But what we wondered was, were we seeing enough, were we doing enough for our neurodiverse students? And we weren't sure that we were catering for them. We've still found kids wandering around by themselves or being by themselves at lunchtime. And as Rachael said, those friendships are really important. And so we spoke to the kids and said, what can we do? And one of the things was that they needed a place, they needed something where they could see who are the other kids like them, because in their learning community, they didn't always know. So that's where we got ICANN involved, and we're really pleased that we've done that. And it did give a place for those kids to come together, to feel safe, but more importantly, to fully recognise their neurodivergence as a blessing, as something that was positive, not something that was a negative. And it gave them a spot to express their feelings and their ideas and have some fun. So all of a sudden that had a huge impact on some of those kids. From that, they wanted clubs. So Rachael also said about having agency. They said they wanted clubs, they wanted places for them to come together on a regular basis. And so we had kids forming their own clubs, getting teachers to support them. So they saw the teachers as their allies. We were, as a school, were trying then to give less yard duties and things like that, so the teachers could be there at lunchtime to run a club. And we now have clubs that run at least 2 clubs every lunchtime, every day of the week. And the kids run some of those with the teacher being there to supervise, through to the kids have asked, could you run a club for this? So from a whole school perspective, it meant that we could say this was our focus, that we were really focusing on including everybody, and making sure that that actually worked. It meant that we needed to do professional development, and ICANN helped here. In fact, it gave us the starting point, because Chris and Chloe came out and spoke to the staff, and it really enabled the staff to see that these people had very successful lives. Again, for all of the staff to see that kids who were neurodivergent, who were sometimes absolute pains in their lessons. Sorry, Chris, I'm sure you were never a pain, but sometimes you were. You know, that you just needed to find a different way to relate to them. And what we say at school is that relationships are important, and it's important for every child. And so that is so important. It also enabled the teachers to ask questions of people that clearly had input into this, that they understood it from sort of both sides of the fence, so to speak, and so gave them real credibility. I think the thing that we did best with ICANN, though, Chris, was actually with the parents, because we had some parents where, you know, it's a wonderful area, Brunswick East, but we still had a couple of parents that had this stigma attached to my child being labelled as different, or having autism, or having ADHD, or whatever it was, and that was a label that was going to be negatively impacting their child for the rest of their life. They saw it as a real problem. And when we had the family night where parents could come along and talk to, I don't know if you were there, Chris, but Chloe certainly was, but when they came along and could talk to other parents and talk to Chloe, and see that it wasn't a life sentence for their child. Actually, they had some really, they needed to look at their child's creativity in a very different way. It gave them a group of people they could talk to. It gave them some real hope that this was something that could actually be positive for their child. For a couple of those parents, it was absolutely transformative. For me, in terms of getting staff on board, it was making sure that relationships is upfront with all our students, making sure that I give them as much time, because time is always the problem in a school. You never ever have enough. And David, I'm sorry, we never have enough money either, but we do admit that you're trying hard and some of the things coming through. And I really love David's point that doing some of the research, because that's one of the things that the department has done, in my opinion, really well the last few years, is the things that they've brought out, they're not the glossy brochure. They come out with lots of research behind it, and then you can use that in the school for your professional development. You can give it to parents, some of it, you can tailor it for newsletters and all those sorts of things. And building those relationships and making sure we're listening to kids, I think is the most important thing we can do. And Chris, I think ICANN gave us a real focus to start that discussion.
Thanks so much, Janet. We're really happy to hear that. Yeah, you've embraced the relationship with us, and we're really happy that it's been beneficial. There is, for everyone's benefit, there is a video on the Brunswick East Primary School lunchtime clubs. It's a fantastic video that we will share. Janet's embarrassed about. It's a great video. You come across so well. We will share it.
Good. I just don't like listening to my voice or looking at Chris. Chris, I'm sorry, I have to go.
No problem.
But thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thanks, Janet. All right, next we have Erin at Surf Coast Secondary College. We were very lucky to run a program there last year where we were, just working with Erin's team was seamless, and yeah, the families, it was just a really good experience all around. So Erin's going to reflect on what she saw from the program, what steps a principal can take to empower teaching staff outside of disability inclusion teams to be champions for inclusion, and how did she prepare her school for the disability inclusion reform.
Thanks, Chris. Good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay as well. I'm in a different location as well this morning, and there is some drilling in the background, so hopefully that doesn't interrupt us too much as well. Yeah, really happy to be here to share our positive story about our involvement in ICANN last year, and we have programs booked again this year that we're really looking forward to as well. I think one thing, thinking about the DI in bigger terms, that we really just stopped when the reform was announced, and really did a really long, hard check on our school, and just really reflected on what the main needs were, because there's a lot that you can do, there's a lot that we will do, but really making sure that we were focusing our energy on the places that our students really needed it first, and that was going to make a really big impact on, the majority of our students as well. A lot of our data, including NCCD data, our funding data, and lots of other sources of information, told us that either diagnosed ASD or undiagnosed ASD was one of the needs for us, along with some language disorders and ADHD as well. So we really spent some time looking at the material that the department provided, and doing our own research as well. And then I heard Chris speak at a principal forum, and then we really felt that ICANN was going to be a program that could make a difference for us at Surf Coast. I think that one of the things that was the most powerful for us was the data that we received back at the end of the program, the reflections from the students, that really showed how transformative it had been for their sense of self and sense of being and connectedness to school and others. And we've really had some, we've kept tracking those students as well. Some really powerful data to indicate that has made a lasting impact on those students as well. Many of the students we had in the program, their attendance was a bit all over the place, and that has really changed. Those students are attending far more often at school, which is wonderful. And presentations at our wellbeing centre used to be quite high for many of those students as well, feeling quite anxious or feeling disconnected at school, etc. And for some of those students, that has all but disappeared after their involvement in the ICANN program. Relationships with parents, I would agree with Janet, just feeling that we understand where they and their students are coming from a little bit more better through the program. And I think also for our young people, just seeing the mentors and being involved with the mentors in the program as well, to see post-school that they can flourish as adults, and to make that really positive, wonderful connection with adults that are neurodiverse as well, was just such a wonderful vibe when we had the sessions at the school. We loved it, and that's why we will continue to use ICANN into the future. And I think that that's one thing that's important when we're thinking about the reforms too, was we didn't want to be doing something that was just a one-off, and that we would do and say, okay, we've ticked that off and we've spent this little bit of money. We wanted to consider how ICANN or other programs and things that we do can be embedded into our regular processes, and ways that we support our neurodivergent people in this context, but in relation to other programs that we're doing as well. I think in relation to the question about how we're supporting other people to be champions as well, we spent quite a bit of time last year actually just modelling in classes and co-teaching with teachers. So I have a disability inclusion learning specialist at the school, and I have 2 other staff with some positions of responsibility in that space as well. So they were both spending quite a bit of time modelling, co-teaching, helping some staff to really understand the ways that we can approach inclusion in the classroom for students. And then that's going to continue this year too, and just kind of, you know, spreading that out and making sure that people feel supported. And I think when they have someone with them in the classroom, that was has been proven to be a really good use of our funding from the DI as well in that way. I've also really supported staff to engage in the Masters in Inclusion and the grad dip programs as well. We've got 4 staff doing that, and I think that they're bringing research and understanding and passion into the school as well. And another thing I started to do at the end of last year in terms of recruitment was actually ask people when we're interviewing teachers to the school questions related to catering to diverse needs. Because we really do want to make sure that we are having staff in our school that share our understanding and philosophy and approach, and are going to fit into our culture really well as well. So that's something that we have been doing too. But overall, you know, I think a lot of what Janet said, I would agree with as well. But, you know, it is really about that clear difference that we have seen in our young people in how they are connected to each other more, are just happier coming to school, are actually coming to school, and are happy to share all of their wonderful strengths that they have with us, has been just amazing. So we'll look forward to that continuing with a new different group of students this year.
Thanks so much, Erin. Yeah, I feel like there's some great steps in what you've shared on how to expand Tier 2 of the disability inclusion funding reform in a school. There's some great guidance in that. Thank you so much for that, Erin. We are a little bit behind, but we will get through everything. We're now going to cross to Steve, who's in Portland, in that western corner of Victoria. So Steve is principal of Portland Bay School, a specialist school, and Steve networks very well with local schools. So whilst we've given Steve questions, you know, how has Portland Bay partnered with the program? What has it seen? How do you empower, you know, a wide range of staff to be champions for inclusion? I'm going to ad-lib a bit here, Steve, and ask you, how have you achieved the local partnerships with schools that you have? Because yes, it's a regional area, and perhaps schools in regional areas do network more easily. That might be a thought bubble, but you have achieved quite a unique relationship with all of them. I think it would benefit a lot of people here for you to talk about how you've done that.
Thanks very much, Chris, and yeah, good morning, everyone. Yeah, so we've been running our Imagination Club for 5 years across 8 schools. How did we get it started? To be honest, I don't really know, except that all the principals in Portland, we started meeting for breakfast and just talking about what were the needs in our school, and we all we're talking about, you know, kids that need a bit of help with their social and emotional learning, and we started looking at, well, what can we do to you know, to address those needs. And at the same time, my school had not really been a part of the community for a long time, and we were very conscious as a leadership team at my school to, you know, what David said, you know, be part of the system and make connections with our mainstream colleagues. And we felt we had a lot to offer our mainstream colleagues, and it turns out that they had a lot to offer us as well. So it was a two-way relationship. So that was really good. I think our Imagination Club, when I was sort of trying to think about it in really basic terms, it's a really non-threatening and friendly, relaxed environment. And when you've got those sort of characteristics, it's easy to introduce success for the kids and for the kids to feel success. And I think that's where the real benefit has been the kids are feeling success. The schools, all the schools that are involved can see that happening, and it's like, you know, light bulbs going off. You know, once kids feel success, they're on their journey, they're on their learning journey, and all those efforts we make about, you know, a guaranteed and viable curriculum. If you don't have that success first, then they're not accessing it, and that's what the Imagination Club has done for us. And I know it's successful because I've got a big waiting list, Chris, of people that want to get in the program. So it's been great.
Thanks, Steve. I do think there's a lot in the partnerships you've developed. Yeah, that's probably a credit to you and just, yeah, your acceptance of everyone. But it is unique in Portland. I drive around Victoria a lot. There's a unique partnership you've achieved there. All right. Maybe Steve, sorry, just briefly, would there be any advice you would have for any other school here that might feel, whilst they're part of the education system, they might feel like they need to lean in more? Any tips on how to get started? Was it those breakfasts that made a difference for you, or what was the starting point?
The starting point was those breakfasts because it was a chance for the principals to get to know each other and develop that collegiality. And, you know, when you're in that sort of environment, you tend to sort of share your problems and you know, it shouldn't be surprising that, you know, we've actually got similar type problems, but yeah, there you go. When you actually talk about them, it sort of crystallizes, and we started looking for what could we do to address some of those things. We got involved in things like group leadership, which, you know, that's fine too, as one-off type things. But the Imagination Club was a really substantial program. You know, it's got a lot of meat in it. You know, there's a lot of communication activities. There's lots of teamwork, and that's the program that really made a difference for those kids that have been involved in it. Yeah. Thanks,
Steve. For those, whatever time you've joined, our primary school program is called I Can Imagination Club. So it's for students with big imaginations, creative problem solvers. You get a very broad range of students in the program. Next, we'll go to Rod Kendall, who's assistant principal at Hoppers Crossing Secondary College. As I said at the beginning, if you've just joined Hoppers, it's a great government school, a very committed teaching team. So we're lucky to have a representative here today. Thank you for joining us, Rod. If you could reflect on the impact of the program at Hoppers, but also how has Hoppers achieved such a committed teaching culture? Like that's always what I see and feel when I'm at your school. And how have you empowered a range of staff, you know, outside of the one? I mean, Christine's amazing, but there's other teachers at the school who have been inspired by you and Christine to be champions for inclusion. I know I've met them. So how have you done that?
Oh, good morning, everybody. One of our school motto is prosperity through diversity, and that diversity ranges from the 50 plus cultures we have, including ASD students. So it's about our whole community. We go by a catchphrase: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that catchphrase is through everything that we do. ICANN has had a terrific, a positive outlook on our kids. I mean, if we look at our kids, when they say, I feel positive about being autistic, before going through an ICANN program at 46%, after going through an ICANN program at 70%. So that's that positive feel for the kids. About being connected to other autistic students, going from 23% to 60%. So we have this connection with our kids. But I think the most important thing is getting teachers on board. And that's, I think, what is the important part of when we talk about a starting point, is we have a principals meeting once a term. And we gave importance to Chris and ICANN coming out to Hoppers Crossing by saying we're giving over that principals meeting to Chris and the ICANN network. And that's got our staff on board. And that's the big part about giving teachers strategies and making them feel included. We talk about making students feel included, but you also need to make staff feel included in that process. And Chris, you are magical with your words, your ability to touch hearts, and also have a positive story at the same time has really helped our staff feel connected with their ASD kids at the same time. So it's through that connection that our staff then led that idea about more involvement with ICANN and getting involved with our kids. Some of the strategies that you've given us, the ASD profiles, about working with our students, getting to know them better, getting a profile on each of our kids, and then having teachers be able to read those and then know what these kids are interested in. The trumpet, Rachel, is the same story. It's that idea about having the connection to each of the kids and what will make them tick. We always talk about a hook in teaching. Well, each of these kids needs that explicit hook given to them. And the program through putting together the profiles has definitely helped. So for us, getting your staff on board, inviting ICANN out to the school is by far the greatest step. About giving over that time and saying as leaders of schools, I think this is that important that we're going to give over time. I'm going to give over a whole staff meeting and let's just spend time about what we can do better as a school. So it's about not only getting the kids involved, I'll say as a consequence, it's about getting the staff invested in that whole process along the way. If they have a say and they have an interest themselves, it piques that interest, because staff have always said, how can I help these kids? And have been sort of bereft of strategies to do it. ICANN brings that in. And I just want to quickly talk about a great success story when we talk about student voice. One of our students in going through ICANN was a very shy young lad, would find it difficult to express himself, would always would say yes to everything. Like, even though he was unhappy about some of the things he was doing, he would be compliant. Through ICANN, that gave him the power to eventually empower him to talk to his parents who are split up and say, I would rather live with one parent over another. That takes an awful lot. So changed the life of a young man, and he's much happier. And the fact that he now has a skill set to be able to express those with both his family and within the school setting. So I would just say to all the leaders out there, get ICANN involved. Make sure that you get your staff involved. And if you've got your staff involved, as we know with most things, the rest of it will take care of itself.
Thanks so much, Rod. You've been very generous with your positive feedback. We are one part of the village at Hoppers Crossing Secondary. It is a very committed teaching team there. You've got a special culture. That's always really evident. And I guess that's a nice segue to just thinking about a bigger question of how can we support and educate the wider school community? So if you think of parents, carers, the peers of autistic neurodivergent students, your parents and friends associations, your school councils, if you think of those stakeholders, how can we bring them on the journey to embrace the benefits of inclusive education? Would anyone like to just have a stab at that? It's a big question. Perhaps if we think about answering that for a new principal, a principal that might have started at their school this year and might be going, how do I bring everyone with me? Would anyone like to have a go at that one?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind for me, Chris, is just making it student-centered and making, bringing those, not being about we have to do this reform or here's the data that, says this and this is why we're doing things. So being about, putting those faces to the names and, making that student-centered, because we know that teachers come to school for the students and that's why we do the work. So I think that is the first thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah, great reminder, Erin. So true. Steve?
Yeah, the first thing that I thought was just meeting the ICANN people and talking to them. Talking to Lauren, who coordinates our program. Every time I see her, she just lives and breathes it, and that gives you confidence that, oh, this is going to be good. This is going to be a good program, and the fact that, Chris, you come to our program at least once a semester, and which sort of demonstrates that you've got your eye on the ball too, and my staff can see that, and so they're going, oh, there's good things going on at this program. This is worth doing. So I think that's part of it too.
Thanks, Steve. Rod, sorry to put you on the spot. Can I ask you, how have you brought parents and carers with you in creating the culture at Hoppers Crossing?
Well, I think part of it is the staff being on board as well, because therefore, even when you're having parent-teacher interviews, even regular phone calls from parents, that flows through about the fact that we are all together in this, and that's a whole community. So we try our hardest in a secondary setting. Getting parents involved in a secondary setting is difficult at times. But it's just keeping those plugging away as we go all the way through.
Thanks, Rod. All right, I will. I'm just going to move to sharing some practical tips that might be useful for your Wednesday or your Thursday or next week, just so for the range of people who are here, that you get some further practical insights. But what I might just ask Rachael, sorry, it was remiss of me, Rachael, was there anything on getting, the peers of autistic students? How do we help, the peers of autistic students to understand and be supportive peers better?
Yeah, there's always a diverse selection of peers that autistic students and neurodiverse students have in schools. They may not be on the spectrum, or they might be. Unfortunately, autism is not fully accepted everywhere by students still, and it's getting better, which is great. I think it's really important that you have resources and support available for students who want to know how to support their neurodiverse peer at a school, but at the same time continue to support that student themselves. And if they want to, sorry about my language, but if they want to fit in and not want to educate all of their friends about autism or their needs specifically, well, let's just help them slide into that friendship group in the way that they want to do it. And if they want to educate and have their peer group know about them and what they need and their needs, then we do that for them as well. But it's all about how that neurodiverse student wants to be seen as in their group.
Thanks, Rachael. So true. All right, I will just share some tips and resources in our last 5 minutes. So the QR code there will take you to an expression of interest form if you'd like to book an ICANN speaker to come to talk at a student assembly, a staff professional development workshop, or your groups of parents, carers. It's also the form you can fill out if you'd like our primary school or secondary school program. So we will share this slide deck and recording with you, but I'll just briefly share. Obviously, data is so important. Erin reflected on how Surf Coast Secondary College did a deep check of where it was at and what it needed, which I think that's a really important insight. This, especially the Tier 2 funding within the Disability Inclusion Bundle, That is such a huge opportunity for schools. For us, we had a big independent evaluation of our program last year. There were 745 online survey responses in it. 31 government schools took part. And there were some amazing findings to validate this journey of empowering autistic adults to be mentors for autistic neurodivergent students in primary and secondary schools. Data that said there was a sense of belonging, connectedness to peers, hope and optimism, increase in autistic identity, community engagement, and sense of belonging, self-esteem, connectedness to school. The real insight was the program was increasing that sense of belonging and how important sense of belonging was for autistic neurodivergent students. You can refer to the executive summary there, and we're grateful for the department for backing that evaluation. The program, as Steve was referring to it, it has a lot of content on teamwork and communication. I just want to share some insights for your Wednesday, wherever you might be joining, especially if you're overseas, as we have some overseas guests today. We've talked a lot about a strengths-based approach and how do you practically do that. Obviously, if you're in Victoria, we talk individual education plans, or if you're in the Catholic system, it's personalized learning plans or adjustment plans. Always really helpful to bring out students' hobbies and interests and to leverage those interests in curriculum or in your lunchtime clubs that Janet was referring to. But always have that positive first reaction to the different answers that autistic neurodivergent students have in their classwork and their group work. A positive first reaction can go a long way to validating that student's processing style and their unique strengths. Sometimes, especially during moments of transition, that year 6 to year 7 transition, it can be really helpful to have up your sleeve some really quick, solid understanding of the unique strengths that autistic neurodivergent learners can have. Some autistic kids, aren't aware of their unique strengths, and some might have a real sense of shame about who they are. Not all, but some. And so it's really helpful to really help them rewire their brain to seeing themselves as a really positive, autonomous, unique individuals. So having a sense of, the high focus, creative problem solving, loyalty, truthfulness, memory capacity that, is very, very common in many autistic neurodivergent students can help you when you're working with a family to construct a IEP or disability inclusion profile. Just a quick tip is always seek to give your autistic students responsibility. We love having little things to control. It's always a nice way to bring down our anxiety, however that anxiety manifests itself. And this is where teaching teams can be so creative in giving autistic students something they can control. This can be really simple. I met a principal the other day who's got one autistic student at her school who waters the principal's garden. There's this lovely garden outside the school, and the job of this autistic student who's obsessed with gardening is to tend to it every recess and lunch, and it's made a world of difference to this student's confidence. Another just quick tip is some autistic students, I was like this, so I'll use my own personal story. I could make a mountain out of a molehill at secondary school in particular. I could really catastrophize some little trigger, whether it was at a school excursion or any change in the timetable, or if, there was a substitute teacher, could really spin me out. So it can do a lot to, I guess, as a school leader, to identify, who are those teaching staff, or even, your admin team, who might be really safe people for your autistic neurodivergent students. Because it's those safe people, whatever their capacity in the school, might be playing, a real role to just keeping that student at school for longer in that particular day to, just bring down some anxiety levels. I should say we are at time, but I just want to briefly say ICANN is now on the school mental health menu, and in this slide deck is some insights on how you can take the program. We have face-to-face programs in Barwon, Greater Melbourne, Northern Victoria and Southwest Victoria, but we can deliver our program online right throughout the state. And I might just finish with some quick resources. We've got a resources page that's got tip sheets on lots of different topics that you can share with your staff. There's a fantastic video the department's made, The Art of Learning with Autism, that we collaborated with the department on. This is a great video to share at a student assembly. It's a great video for a term 1 student assembly. It's a very safe, accessible video where 2 young autistic adults are talking about, their learning style and what they need to succeed. And it's a gem. This is a really safe one to share at a student assembly. And perhaps I can look at a debriefing tool in school classrooms. And then there's the Diverse Learners Hub, which is the department's flagship initiative to build the capacity of the education system to support diverse learners. We will leave it there. Just a final thank you to our panelists, Rachael, David, Janet, Erin, Steve, and Rod. What a great group to start Wednesday with. Thank you very much then. We will email you the recording and this slide deck. Thanks so much for joining us.